The man who would become America's first known serial killer was born as Herman Webster Mudgett, but the world remembers him by another name, a name whispered through history: Dr. H.H. Holmes. He was brilliant, polite, soft-spoken, educated. He smiled often, listened carefully, and dressed like a man who belonged in high society. On the surface, he was the ideal gentleman. But Holmes was no ordinary man. He was a chameleon, a manipulator, a predator in a bowler hat. Born in 1861 in Gilmanton, New Hampshire, Holmes was raised in a devout and rigid household. His father, an alcoholic disciplinarian, ruled the family with fear. Neighbors described Holmes as distant, quiet, bright but strange. And as he grew, so too did his darkest curiosities. There are stories, some likely true, others perhaps shaped by legend, that he performed mock surgeries on animals as a boy, that he'd trap them, dissect them, strip them down to bone. He showed no fear of death. In fact, he seemed drawn to it. At 18, Holmes enrolled at the University of Vermont, but he left after a year and transferred to the University of Michigan's Department of Medicine and Surgery. There, in the cadaver labs, he found something more compelling than any textbook: unclaimed bodies. And from those bodies, a new kind of business was born. Holmes began stealing cadavers from the school's medical supply. He would disfigure them, burn them, stage false accidents, then use forged documents to claim life insurance policies. He collected thousands of dollars in payouts, but it wasn't just about money. For Holmes, death was never inconvenient. It was a tool, and in the years to come he would wield it masterfully. After graduation, he moved often, from city to city, always under a different name. He scammed employers, seduced women, and left behind a trail of fraud and suspicion. He married several women simultaneously, each unaware of the others. He opened pharmacies, collected debts, and then vanished without a trace. No charges, no trials, just silence. In 1886, he arrived in Chicago, a city growing fast, full of immigrants, opportunity, and anonymity. Here, he changed his name for the final time: H.H. Holmes. It sounded proper, medical, authoritative. He liked how it felt. With forged credentials, Holmes bought a pharmacy from a woman named Elizabeth Holton. Some versions of the story say she disappeared soon after the sale. Others claim she survived. The truth remains uncertain, just as Holmes wanted. He opened businesses, made friends with officials, hired women to work for him. They came from small towns, hopeful for a better life in the big city, and many of them would never leave. By 1887, Holmes had acquired a vacant lot across from the pharmacy. There, he began construction of what he called a mixed-use building: shops on the first floor, apartments and hotel rooms above. But Holmes wasn't building a hotel. He was building a trap. A massive, windowless, soundproof structure. A puzzle box of terror where he controlled every door, every room, every breath. A castle. And in this castle, Holmes would become something far worse than a con man. He would become a monster. The newspapers would later call it the Murder Castle. But by the time the world discovered its secrets, it was already soaked in silence. By 1887, H.H. Holmes had become a familiar face in Chicago's Englewood neighborhood. His pharmacy was successful. His reputation was clean. His charm, impeccable. But across the street, on a quiet plot of land, Holmes was about to raise something far more sinister than a storefront. A building with secrets behind every wall. He bought the lot under a different name, of course, just one of many aliases he used. He designed the building himself, room by room. No official architect, no full blueprint on record. And to this day, no one is exactly sure what the original floor plan looked like. Because Holmes made sure of that, he'd hire construction crews, then fire them halfway through the job, bring in a new team, replace them before they finished. He claimed they were too slow or dishonest. But the truth, Holmes didn't want anyone knowing the whole picture. Only he would know the castle's real purpose. On the outside, it looked normal enough. A solid 3-story brick structure with clean lines and large windows facing the street. But inside was a nightmare designed with precision. Rooms with no windows, secret stairwells, doors that only opened from the outside, dead-end hallways, trapdoors, hidden gas lines wired to control valves in Holmes's office. He could watch guests without them knowing. He could lock them in, gas them, silence them, dispose of them, without ever leaving his desk. The second floor housed the so-called guest rooms, but not all were what they seemed. Some were soundproof chambers with steel walls. Others had peepholes in the ceiling or wall slots where Holmes could observe or drop in toxic gas. And beneath the castle was the basement, a graveyard of secrets. There, Holmes installed a dissecting table. He had vats of quicklime, acid baths, stretching racks, a custom-built crematorium, complete with high-heat bricks. Human bones could be stripped, bleached, and sold. It's rumored he sold skeletons to medical schools under false credentials. And the chutes, angled shafts connecting guest rooms to the basement, were designed to slide a body down with ease. No witnesses, no evidence. By 1892, construction was complete. Just in time for the 1893 Chicago World's Fair, the greatest event in America at the time. Tens of thousands of visitors flooded the city, and to many, Holmes's hotel seemed like a perfect place to stay. Bright rooms, clean beds, attentive service, especially for young women traveling alone. They were his preferred guests. He offered them work, housing, charm, a smile that made them feel safe. But once they stepped inside, they entered a maze with no exit. And when they vanished, no one asked questions. It was Chicago, a city in motion. People came and went every day. The castle made them disappear, quietly, permanently. And as bodies fell through chutes and screams were sealed behind steel doors, Holmes went to work, methodical, calm, always in control. In that monstrous building, HH Holmes played judge, warden, and executioner. By 1893, Chicago was a city transformed. The World's Fair had turned it into a beacon of modernity. Electric lights, grand architecture, and crowds from every corner of the globe. In this glittering chaos, anonymity thrived. And in the quiet neighborhood of Englewood, a man named HH Holmes was exploiting that anonymity to deadly perfection. The castle's upper floors were open for business. Lodgers came and went. Young women answered ads for secretarial work, shop positions, and room rentals. Holmes welcomed them with a soft voice and warm smile. He offered safety in a city full of strangers, but for many, it was the last face they'd ever see. Julia Smythe was one of the first to vanish. Holmes had begun an affair with her while her husband worked for him in the pharmacy. Julia moved into the castle with her young daughter, Pearl. On Christmas Eve, 1891, both disappeared. No explanation, no goodbye. Holmes claimed Julia had fled with a lover. Later, he hinted that she had died during a botched abortion. There was no investigation, no charges, no trace. Emmeline Segrand followed soon after. She was bright, ambitious, and charmed by Holmes's attention. He promised her marriage, introduced her to others as his fiancée. Then one day, she was gone. He told people she'd gone to visit family. Others heard she had eloped, but her belongings were found locked in a castle room. A trunk, a hat, A bloodstain just faint enough to dismiss. The pattern had begun. Holmes wasn't just luring victims into his trap. He was mastering the art of erasing them. Women without strong family ties, transplants to the city, aspiring performers, job seekers, travelers, people who could vanish without consequence. He used newspaper ads to offer jobs and rooms. Dozens of women responded. One by one, they entered the castle. Most never came out. Inside, their fates were horrifying. Some were locked in rooms Holmes could fill with gas from his office. Others were tricked into sealed vaults. A few may have been suffocated. Others poisoned, some dismembered. He installed chutes to send bodies directly to the basement. There, in his gruesome laboratory, Holmes burned, buried, or stripped flesh with acid. He even sold some skeletons to medical schools. Every inch of the castle had a purpose. Every turn, a trap. Every room, a choice. But Holmes was not a frenzied killer. He was composed, controlled. He kept notes, lists, inventory, as if each death was a transaction. In public, he remained the charming gentleman. A businessman, a doctor. Behind closed doors, he was perfecting his craft. The castle absorbed them, women with hopes, futures, lives. And yet, no one suspected a thing. It was a city of 2 million people. Disappearances happened. Police were overwhelmed. The World's Fair masked the screams. Holmes knew it, counted on it, played the city like a grand illusion. He walked the streets without suspicion, ate dinner at local cafes, charmed guests with stories. At night, he returned to his castle, a place that no longer housed dreams, but death. And somewhere inside its walls, someone else was already screaming. For years, Holmes operated in the shadows of Chicago, confident, composed, invisible. But every empire of lies eventually begins to crumble. And for Holmes, the cracks began with people who didn't vanish so quietly. In 1894, Holmes hired a man named Benjamin Pitezel, a carpenter, alcoholic, and struggling father of 5. Holmes saw him as useful, disposable, and easy to manipulate. Pitezel helped design some of the castle's most sinister features: trapdoors, hidden compartments, false walls. He knew parts of the secret, and that made him dangerous. But it wasn't the castle that brought suspicion. It was money. Holmes had been running insurance scams for years. He'd fake injuries, set fires, and even staged entire identities. With Pitezel, he planned his boldest con yet: fake Pitezel's death, collect a $10,000 insurance payout and split the cash. But Holmes had a better idea. Why fake a death when you could make it real? Holmes killed Pitezel himself using chloroform, then staged the scene as an accidental lab explosion. The body was burned, mutilated beyond recognition. But Holmes had an ace. He had the real dental records. He presented them, collected the payout, and calmly moved on. Or so he thought. Enter Detective Frank Geyer, a Philadelphia police officer who'd later describe Holmes as the most dangerous man I've ever encountered. Geyer didn't buy the story. He dug into Holmes's past, the aliases, the marriages, the castle, and most alarmingly, Pitezel's family. Because Holmes hadn't just killed the father. He had taken the children, 3 of them. He told Pitezel's widow, Carrie, that her husband was hiding for legal reasons, that he'd help take care of the kids, move them city to city under different names. She believed him, and while she waited, Holmes moved the children across the Midwest, changing hotels, names, even disguising them. Geyer followed the trail, uncovering a heartbreaking path of deceit and delay. And finally, he found the children in shallow graves, one in the cellar of a Toronto home, 2 more hidden beneath a rented house in Indianapolis. The case was no longer about insurance. It was murder, calculated, cold, cruel. Back in Chicago, whispers about the castle began to spread. Police finally searched the building. What they found was beyond comprehension. A dissection table, acid vats, surgical tools, bones, clothing, hair, women's shoes, hidden rooms, and no explanation. Holmes was arrested in Boston in 1894. He confessed, partially strategically, to over 20 murders. Then changed his story. Again and again. His castle? Burned in a mysterious fire soon after his arrest. Arson, never solved. What remained were rumors and bodies. By late 1894, the truth was no longer hidden. Police had raided the castle, found rooms without windows, trapdoors stained with blood, secret hallways, shattered bones, remnants of women no one had reported missing because no one had known they were gone. And yet, Holmes remained calm, smiling, collected, as if he were still in control. The trial of HH Holmes began in October 1895 in Philadelphia. It wasn't about the castle, not yet. He was charged with the murder of Benjamin Pitzel. That's all prosecutors needed. Holmes defended himself in court, dressed in fine suits, charming the jury, speaking like a gentleman. But behind his polished words were dark admissions. He confessed to killing Pitzel. Then he confessed to the children. Then 20 more. And then he took it back. Over and over again. Confessions, retractions, contradictions. Holmes seemed to enjoy the performance. Like the courtroom was his new stage. The press swarmed the case. America's first serial killer, they called him. His nickname? The Beast of Chicago. People couldn't look away. He fascinated them, disgusted them, haunted them. Holmes claimed he had been possessed by Satan, that his eyes would sometimes turn dark, his thoughts not his own. He blamed trauma, genius, even God, anything except guilt. The jury didn't buy it. On May 7, 1896, H.H. Holmes was hanged in Philadelphia's Moyamensing prison. His final words? "I was born with the devil in me." He asked for his body to be buried in concrete, afraid his corpse would be stolen, dissected, or worse. Even in death, he tried to control the narrative. The castle stood empty for years, decaying behind fences in fear. Locals swore they heard screams at night, saw flickering lights. In 1895, it burned to the ground. Arson, no suspects, no arrests, just fire and silence. To this day, no one knows exactly how many people Holmes murdered. Some say 9, others 27. Holmes himself once claimed over 100, then changed it again. No names, no closure, just dust and bones. He didn't just kill, he built a factory for it, a castle of horror, where no fairy tale ever ended well.